Hi, everyone who's just joined us. We're going to get started in just a minute here. And it's great that we're having so many people say hi in the chat. People from Gilroy, we have Naomi from Supervisor Lee's office, people from Luna. We love Luna. So thank you so much for being with us today. And we'll get started in just a moment here. Oh, Catherine, hi. It's great seeing everyone in the chat. I'm used to seeing people in person and we haven't gotten to see folks in person. So it's good to see so many of you joining us today. Sandy's here. All right, so why don't we go ahead and get started. Hi everyone, my name is Nadia Aziz. I'm with the Law Foundation of Silicon Valley. I'm really excited to have all of you join us today to talk about this really important issue. We will be having simultaneous translation in both Spanish and Vietnamese. And how that's going to work is that there's going to be a globe icon on the bottom. And if you click on it, you can choose your preferred language and you'll receive audio in that language, but you'll continue to hear and see everyone. So we'll go ahead and translate what I just said into Spanish and Vietnamese.
Ok, chào mừng quý khách đến với buổi trò chuyện về vấn đề housing với chủ đề sự xa hoa để có một nơi ở. Xin quý vị vui lòng nhấn vào biểu tượng quả cầu ở phía dưới và chọn ngôn ngữ mình muốn được nghe. Quý vị sẽ được nghe bằng ngôn ngữ đó, nhưng mà quý vị vẫn sẽ nhìn thấy những cái vị khách mời hôm nay cũng như là màn hình chính. Ok.
Bienvenidos sean todos y gracias por estar aquí esta tarde. Por favor, haga clic en el icono del globo que está en la parte superior de la pantalla y escoja su lenguaje preferido. Va a recibir un audio con el lenguaje preferido, pero continuará viendo las panelistas y los panelistas y las pantallas compartidas.
So you should be able to see the globe icon right now, and you can click on that and choose either Spanish or Vietnamese if you need translation. Do either of you want to translate that? Tao or Norma? Okay, I think you can now hear them in their rooms. So just a reminder before we get started, this event will be recorded and live streamed. We'll put it on Facebook later today. We are going to have some time at 6:30 for questions and answers. So feel free to put in any questions that you have in the chat. A couple other housekeeping. Also, again, language down below. If you click on full screen down below, you should see where it's a little globe. Click on that and you can choose to have either Vietnamese. I also want to welcome all of you all today, but we do have some elected officials who registered, and so I want to just recognize those today. We have Councilmember Pat Showalter from Mountain View, Council members Kevin Park and Suds Jane from Santa Clara. We also have staff from some elected officials' offices. We have Brennan Robbins from Congresswoman Eshu's office, Christina Johnson from Assemblymember Kalra's office, and Naomi Nakano Matsumoto from Supervisor Lee's office. So welcome to all of our elected officials. If there's anyone else in the room who's an elected official, please let me know so that we can recognize you. And welcome to everyone who's not an elected official as well. So I'm seeing a lot of people not being able to see the globe. If you click on full screen and look down below, there should be a globe, right? You'll see the words chat, Q&A, raise your hand, and next to that there's a little globe that says interpretation. So today we're going to have a conversation about what we're seeing here at the Law Foundation of Silicon Valley, and then have a panel discussion about what low-income renters are facing during this pandemic. We're in an unprecedented global health crisis and global pandemic. This is really a challenge that is something that is generational. Like it's something that that you deal with once in a lifetime. But we know before this pandemic started, we were in a housing crisis in Silicon Valley. And this public health crisis has only exacerbated the housing crisis that we were already in. And we know the ongoing housing crisis also exacerbates the public health crisis. When people are housing insecure, they're more at risk of getting sick. And so today we'll talk a little bit about what we've been seeing at the Law Foundation and what others in the community have also been seeing. We can go to the next slide. So we titled the panel, "The Luxury of Staying at Home." During this pandemic, we've heard the best thing that you can do to keep safe from COVID or to keep yourself healthy is to stay at home. But for a lot of the people in our community, especially people of color and people who are low income, staying at home is a luxury. If you're an essential worker, you can't stay at home. If you are at risk of being evicted because you lost income or because you lost work, staying at home is a luxury. And so our goal today is to center the voices of those who have been most acutely affected by this pandemic and by the housing crisis. Those people that as we discuss the housing challenges and as we center those voices, you'll hear from a lot of those voices today. And you'll hear about what low-income families and communities of color are facing during this pandemic. It's important for us at this moment to bear witness about what is happening to our community, to speak truth essentially to power. And that's what we're hoping to do during this panel today. So if you want to move on to the next slide. Can move on to the next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about what we're seeing at the Law Foundation of Silicon Valley. We provide free legal services throughout Santa Clara County. And this is our data since COVID hit. So since the shelter in place began around September 15th through the end of 2020, this is kind of the data from the clients that we've served in our housing unit. We saw 1,565 cases. So these are cases that we actually opened and that we provided some type of assistance to, whether the most basic being advice and counsel. Sometimes it was a legal representation, such as going to court to represent in an eviction case. And this % increase from the same amount of people a year ago. This is over 4,000 people that we've served. About a third of those clients that we served are families with children, and 2/3 of them were women. This was a 14% increase in the number of women who were calling from 2019. We've heard a lot about the burden that this pandemic has had on women, especially working women. We hear a lot about how women are most effective. They've had to, deal with childcare at the same time that many of them are working. And I think this is true when it comes to housing insecurity. A lot of women are being affected, and we're seeing that by who's calling us. Go on to the next slide. We've heard so much about how people of color are most acutely affected during this pandemic. And the same is true for who is calling us and who are reaching out because they're feeling housing insecure. So those are mostly Latinx families. We've actually had a 30% increase over last year in Latinx families calling us. Over 2/3 of our callers are people of color. And so it's those communities who have been most disproportionately impacted by COVID are also, we're seeing, being impacted by the housing crisis and facing housing instability. Next slide. So here are some trends that we've seen that have kind of surprised us or have been a little unusual during this pandemic. We don't actually ask people whether or not they're employed. We do ask source of income, and we've seen almost a 1,500% increase in families whose unemployment was their main source of income. It's not the most source of income, but we've seen maybe the biggest increase in people whose main source of income is unemployment. We've also seen a huge increase in the number of college-age students who have been calling us. It was about 100% increase. It's still a small percentage, but there was an increase. We think this is because a lot of college-age kids are trying to get out of their leases, or may have to have moved back in with their family when they weren't expecting to, which is causing like more stress and more burdens on families. And then 16% of the people calling us are seniors. This is actually a decrease in the number of seniors who called us last year proportionally by percentage. And we think it's because COVID is hitting families and working families maybe more acutely than others. It's still around the same number, but percentage-wise, it was actually a decrease, which we thought was something that was interesting. If you want to go to the next slide. So these are the people who have been calling us, and these are the zip codes that are have been most hardest hit by COVID. And this is population over 100,000. And as you can see, there is a correlation between those zip codes that were most hardest hit by COVID and the people who are and have been calling us during this pandemic. And a lot of that is along the east side. So even if some of the zip codes don't match, it's still East San Jose that's being most acutely affected. And we know from before this crisis, those were the communities that were at risk of displacement and gentrification. They were the communities that were already at the margins, that were already rent insecure. And so when you have something like a global pandemic hit, and when people lose their jobs, when people lose their income, when a family member gets sick, that's when people fall off the margins and fall into housing insecurity. And so it is those communities that were already on the margins that are being most acutely affected during this pandemic. Can we go on to the next slide? So here's what we're seeing and here's what we're doing. We've seen the moratoriums working, but in a limited way. So I think one of the reasons that we haven't had a tsunami of evictions is because of the moratoriums, but they're not as great as they can be. We are seeing a lot of people calling us because they're just confused. The moratoriums require some kind of action on behalf of the tenant. And so in many cases, the tenant just doesn't know what to do, doesn't know what declarations to sign, things like that. And so that's why we're saying up here that there's a limited success and there's confusions about how they work. People are still getting evicted, unfortunately. The moratoriums you can still be evicted for reasons other than non-payment of rent. And if you don't follow the moratoriums exactly, you could be evicted for non-payment of rent. So we had a client recently who, was facing eviction because she didn't sign the declaration within 15 days, didn't really know what to do. We're also seeing a lot more complicated evictions. So landlords who can't evict for non-payment of rent and who are frustrated that their tenants are not paying their rent, look for other ways to evict. So we're seeing a lot of nuisance cases, a lot of alleging some kind of lease violation, alleging they're trying to get out of the rental market. So these complicated cases are harder for us as attorneys to try to defend. Also, but they're also like kind of a loophole, kind of a way for landlords to get around these protections that exist. And Sandy mentioned, and it's true, like we have had the highest in Santa Clara County number of evictions, 145 in the Bay Area County, and this is based on a report that KQED did. One other thing that was kind of interesting, and when we looked at our data, was the number of habitability cases, and habitability essentially means bad conditions. And so we've seen a lot of people calling in because they are calling because their landlord just won't make repairs and they're dealing with mold or pests or like a leaking toilet. And we're not sure why. You know, it could be that landlords are retaliating for tenants not paying rent and saying, you know, I'm not going to fix something because you're not paying rent. It could be that tenants are at home more, so they're noticing problems more, or the problems are becoming more unbearable because they're at home. And also, you know, because of the pandemic, you know, code enforcement and other building enforcement are not going out at the rate that they have. So there's a lack of enforcement as well. And so that's something else that we're seeing families who call us dealing with this. In that, like, during this time, we've been giving advice and counsel, we've been defending people against eviction, and we've also been trying to advocate for better protections, both at the city level, the county level, and at the state level as well. So that's a little bit of a snapshot. If you want to go to the next slide. Oh, I also wanted to mention the current tenant protections. AB 3088 is a statewide moratorium. Basically, it says that if a tenant provides a declaration saying that they have an income loss related to COVID and pay at least 25% of the rent, they're protected from eviction at least June 3rd, 2021. That's what SB 91, which just passed last weekend, that extends this eviction moratorium at least till the end of June. You know, it isn't perfect. It requires the tenants to pay some rent. It requires a declaration. You know, tenants could still get evicted for other reasons other than non-payment of rent. SB 91 also gives some kind of rent, has a program for low-income tenants, some kind of rent assistance, but there are a lot of loopholes, as it requires that that money be paid directly to the landlord, and the landlord has to agree. So we're going to see how this plays out and how this rolls out, and hopefully it will protect some people from eviction. So this is just a snapshot of what we've been seeing at the Law Foundation during this time. We wanted to open it up and to bring in panelists from different parts of the community to really talk about what's been happening in their own communities. So I wanted to introduce our amazing moderator, Gabriela Chavez-Lopez. She is a community catalyst committed to uplifting and championing community voices around challenging issues in our community, particularly for low-income families and people of color. She's currently the communications and membership manager at SV at Home and the president of the Latina Coalition of Silicon Valley. Gabriela has had amazing leadership development and awards, including participating in Harvard Business School's Young American Leaders Academy, the California's Hispanas Organized for Political Equity program, the Latina Coalition's ELA program, the USC Unruh Institute of Politics certification program, and she was honored by the Committee for the Status of Women in 2020 as an Extraordinary Woman of 2020 based on her extensive community involvement and volunteerism. So I wanted to let Gabby take it over from here and introduce the rest of our panelists.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nadia, for the kind introduction, and special thank you to the Law Foundation of Silicon Valley for this invitation to moderate this very critical conversation. I'm so appreciative and grateful for the work that you guys do every day for our community, especially during this pandemic. So feeling a lot of gratitude right now. It is now my distinct pleasure to introduce our fabulous panelists for this evening's discussion. So first we have, who you've just heard from, Nadia Aziz, who is the Housing Directing Attorney for the Law Foundation of Silicon Valley. Nadia has led groundbreaking housing litigation and policy advocacy throughout Silicon Valley in her role at the Law Foundation. Her work includes a multi-year effort to save Palo Alto's only mobile home park and class action fair housing litigation that asserted the right of Section 8 voucher holders to reasonable accommodations for additional bedrooms. Before working at the Law Foundation, Nadia was a housing attorney with Bay Area Legal Aid's Santa Clara County office, where she represented tenants in unlawful detainer matters. Nadia graduated from UCLA School of Law in 2007, and Nadia is married and has 2 daughters. Next panelist is we have Dr. Allende Rudolph, who's the superintendent of Mountain View Westman School District. Dr. Rudolph has been the superintendent since 2015. Previously, he served as Associate Director of School Transformation at the Buffalo Promise Neighborhood, a federally funded program modeled after the Harlem Children's Zone that encourages communities to develop public-private partnerships. His achievements during his tenure with the Promise Neighborhood, including included instituting a one-on-one learning environment, which received recognition from President Obama and Secretary Arne Duncan at the White House, the implementation of a new teacher evaluation system, and 3 new curricula aligned to the new national standards. He also redesigned the school's talent acquisition and management systems with focus on providing positive feedback to encourage growth. Dr. Rudolph received his doctorate in education and leadership, policy, and organizations from Vanderbilt University. He also holds an educational specialist degree in educational leadership and administration, as well as Masters of Education in Secondary Education from George Washington University. He earned his Bachelor of Arts in History from Wittenberg University. Next up, we have Jerome Shaw, president of the Sunnyvale Clients Collaborative at the Sunnyvale Homeless Shelter. Jerome Shaw has been homeless for 3.5 years and currently resides at a Home First shelter in Sunnyvale. Jerome first became homeless in May 2013 when the 4-plex apartment building he was living in was purchased and the new owner moved in. Living with his son and on unemployment in West San Jose at the time, Jerome bounced around from renting hotel rooms and staying with friends for about a year until he found a job in an apartment early 2014. Due to complications related to his mental health, Jerome lost his job in 2015, was evicted from his apartment, and lost custody of his son, who was sent to live with his mother full-time. Since then, Jerome has been homeless and has struggled with mental health issues. Jerome hopes to shine a light on the importance of mental health care and the lack of care that is being provided to individuals who desperately need it. Today, Jerome is the president of the Sunnyvale Shelter Client Collaborative and an apprentice in the local Sheet Metals Workers Union. Our next panelist is Tiffany Wong, who is the tenant organizer and community leader from Milpitas. Tiffany was born and raised in the South Bay, having experienced housing insecurity, and due to the lack of affordability in the area, she is a community organizer and advocate for housing. She graduated from UC Santa Barbara in 2018 with a BA in sociology and has been involved in social change work since moving back home. She mobilized voters of color with Services, Immigrants' Rights, and Educational Network, SIREN, for the 2018 midterm elections and started working with the Milpitas Renters Coalition in early 2019 to fight for tenant protections. Passionate about climate, racial, and housing justice, she ran for Milpitas City Council in 2020 and won over 7,000 votes in a tight race with 8 candidates vying for 2 seats. Some integral parts of her platform included holding developers accountable for building affordable housing, protecting working class people, and utilizing the Housing First model to address homelessness. She embraced policies to create permanently affordable housing, such as community land trusts and limited equity co-ops. She is also supportive of the community opportunity to purchase ordinance, which would allow a nonprofit organization to make a first purchase offer when a multifamily complex is to be sold. Welcome to all of our panelists. Okay, so we'll start with Jerome, if he's ready. I wanted to ask you, what trends are happening in your neighborhood that is leading to greater housing insecurity?
Well, I think it's the trend that we've been seeing for like the last 2 decades since the .com era. And it's just the displacement of individuals due to a lot of the tech companies coming in and buying up land to build campuses and raising the property values in the area and making it a corporate professional area to live in rather than a blue collar, working average person, neighborhoods. And downtown, like San Jose is a perfect example. Well, Palo Alto, East Palo Alto is the first perfect example of displacement and gentrification that occurred because of the tech companies. And now that's kind of flowing over into San Jose. Downtown San Jose has, been purchased. A lot of property has been purchased by tech companies, and they're going to develop, the downtown San Jose area, the San Jose Diridon area, and all the way down Santa Clara Street. And, all this is good for individuals if they work, in the tech companies, but, the individuals who grew up around here, last 10, 20, 30 years, you know, and who have average blue collar jobs can't afford to live in the area anymore because of, you know, the rising rent prices. And, you know, if they have children, their children can't afford to purchase any homes because, you know, the home prices have just gotten outrageous. So, I mean, it's still, you know, it's the trend that's been happening, you know, over the last 20 years. It's just the high prices that the tech companies are making housing and, you know, pushing out the individuals who've lived here for most of their lives.
Yeah, that job housing imbalance is definitely real. And, you know, where do those jobs go to sleep at night? It's a lot of jobs being created. Tiffany, what's your take on any trends that you're seeing in your neck of the woods?
Definitely. I definitely agree with everything that Jerome mentioned. I mean, I think the past generation, as soon as people got jobs, they would move out. But I think in my generation, a lot of people, most of the people I know are still living with their families, or they're crowded with a bunch of friends. And so Jerome mentioned in general this era. So I'm going to talk about the pandemic. Right now, there's so many people who are unemployed or have their hours cut at work or even pay cuts. And so that's affecting their income stream, their ability to pay rent. And there are evictions, like Nadia mentioned, because there are so many people who are confused about their rights and don't know what exactly to do in order to protect themselves during the pandemic. And they have to properly document their income loss as COVID related and report it to the property management. So, you know, there's different people have different access to this information, right? Like your ability to speak English maybe is affecting your access. And so the more that you're in the know, the more likely you're going to be protected. So that's why there's groups like Law Foundation and renters groups that are so important to getting people the knowledge that they need to fill out the declaration and stuff like that. And so that's what's been happening. Evictions, if you're not knowledgeable, like there's been people that I've been seeing, they've been moving. And yeah, I think the key thing I want to say is the burden is on the renter to know what's going on rather than, so the effectiveness of the moratorium lies in how many people know about it.
Definitely. I'm in this work and it's very complicated. So diving in a little bit from an educational standpoint, Dr. Rudolph, I wanted to talk a little bit about, you know, what impacts does housing insecurity and homelessness have on the community that you serve, i.e., you know, missing school, distractions, job stability. What are you seeing in the schools?
Well, first, thanks for having me. Really appreciate being here. And I just want to piggyback off what Jerome and Tiffany said. Even as a superintendent who moved here from out of state, I can tell you, unless you are just coming with a boatload of cash, I can't afford to buy a house, which is why my own school board is providing me a loan to buy one, right? And so it doesn't just affect, you know, people, it affects all of us at different rungs of the field. I think in terms of education, this is like anything we've ever seen, right? So we already had in Mountain View, which is home of Google, a sizable population of homeless students. We had kids who lived in RVs. I mean, I know exactly where they are. You can see their bikes. You can see them playing next to Rangsore Park and other parts of the city. So you take that and you add in Mountain View. We were already providing, and during the summer feeding, we were providing a significant portion of meals, right? So now take in lost wages and you're now feeding everyone. And then you add on to that, because why not just add a couple more layers, internet insecurity. And you tell kids they need to, you know, even though you're in a house or a room or in an RV or, you know, out in the park, you got to focus on school. And you add that on top of it, and then you add on everything else that comes with it, right? The fact that, you know, we're social beings and you can't socialize because you're afraid of getting sick. The fact that, you know, in our community, COVID afflicts, you know, in our community as Latinos, but it affects minorities at a greater rate. And I think all of this has sort of come as the perfect storm and it's really impacting education. And I think in the beginning, you know, when we were out, it was sort of a novel idea. And what I'm starting to see now is that it's wearing on everyone. It's wearing on teachers, it's wearing on kids. It's getting to the point where we're, you know, even I had 7 Zoom meetings today. Like I'm at the point where I'm just like, okay, it's time for us to go back in. And I think all of that is added, but I think, you know, if we think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you cannot take care of business if you are worried about where your food is going to come from, whether or not you have a roof over your head, and whether or not you're going to be safe at night. And I think those 3 big things are issues that are impacting our kids at levels that we've never seen them before. And it won't just stop by bringing kids into the school. Like, we have to tackle this on such a larger scale.
Yeah, lots of challenges, especially for those in the education space, for sure. I have a mom who is a teacher and working from home, so I hear it from the other room, and it's just a lot to take in and a lot to take on. She's on top of it as a special education teacher, so that's another layer of challenge, I think, for these students. So thank you for shedding a light on that. Jerome, I wanted to pass it back to you and kind of talk about, you know, what impacts have housing insecurity and homelessness had on you and your community.
Well, the impact it's had on me is, you know, it's put me in a limbo situation. You know, it's like perpetual limbo. Not knowing when I'm going to be able to actually get back into having my own home, having privacy, you know, being able to do things, you know, for myself, and you know, and being in like the shelter, it gives you a lot of time to ruminate and think about like past mistakes, and it can lead to you know, a lot of, you know, depression or other mental health issues, because they have a van that comes here to the shelter twice a week, and you know, there's a lot of individuals who visit the health van for, you know, health problems, whether it's mental health or just biological health in general, because it's hard to eat right, you know, exercise your brain. It's tough when you're going through the same routine day after day after day, especially for like the seniors and those that have disabilities who are at the shelter 90% of the time. You know, that eats away at your motivation and your happiness and your health. So the impact it's had on me, it's opened my eyes to, you know, the plight of others, but it's also taught me to like focus on keeping myself as healthy as possible, and, you know, doing whatever I can to you know, shed a light on the homeless situation.
Tiffany, did you want to weigh in on this one? How it's affected you? I mean, you've definitely responded to the call and the needs in the community, but how are you doing?
I would like to defer this question to others who would like to answer.
Awesome. Nadia, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, like, I think that we at the Law Foundation have just really seen a lot of people really just kind of at their end, or like I think a lot of the job of our intake, people who do intake and people who are providing advice, has just been to be like, encourage people to like assert their rights, encourage people to like, you know, you can do this, like you are protected, because I think people have just really felt like, I mean, when you talk about mental health and the effect of this pandemic on mental health, like I think people just feel defeated, and I think, you know, like as people who, you know, as community organizers, as lawyers, as, you know, people who are out there in the community, like I feel like like it's hard, but like I feel like we have to be the ones who really are like, no, you can do this. You can uplift yourself. These laws are here to protect you. We can do better as a community. And so I think that that's like, it's been hard, but I feel like that's the role that we have been trying to play and that we hope to play in our community.
Great. And Dr. Rudolph, what are you hearing in terms of, what are under-resourced communities doing to get by in times like these and in times of housing insecurity?
I think schools, I can only speak for my school system, right? So we've become a sort of a service-oriented organization, right? We view ourselves as the connectors to resources that we never thought about, right? It's, you want to connect them to mental health, you want to connect them to housing assistance, you want to connect them to food shelter. I mean, our community engagement facilitators are walking people to, the food bank. And because we can't sign adults up, we can only sign kids up, but we can take a family there and pass them off. And so, we're finding ways to test people more. We are communicating that. I mean, so we've really become sort of this hub of information when it comes to families and kids. At the same time, I think all of us are feeling I can speak for me. I know I feel the burden, right? I feel blessed to be in the position that I am, but there's a lot more sleepless nights because you're trying to figure out a solution for people. You want to get them to the resources that they can so they get help. And so you find yourself like just saying like, well, I'll just stay up a little bit later just to get this more done, or how can we figure this one out, or reading some type of research, or you hear a story and you're like, we got to find a way to connect them. And I think that's unprecedented in these times. And, I will say on the positive note, because I always, that's probably the one thing I've been trying to do, is that I've also realized that, and I've tried to encourage our community to give back more, right? So it's not just enough to tithe. It's important to find an organization that is doing something for other people, and to give back more, to help others. And so I think that's been one of the blessings. I don't know if everybody's doing it, but I at least know that's one of the things I'm trying. But a lot of connecting people to resources is what the schools have become, because we're sort of focal points of the community. Yeah. And I will say the last thing I'll say is our homeless liaison, McKinney Vento, we increased her hours. She was part-time, and we had to increase her hours because we've seen the numbers almost double in less than a year's time. And so that is a large concern of ours, and we'll keep investing resources.
Yeah, well, we can definitely encourage it, Dr. Rudolph. So I'm with you. There's a lot of great organizations doing just tremendous work in the community, and finding one in your area or in your neighborhood is so important for all of us. So thank you for bringing that to light. So going into policy, I saw someone in the chat mention, how does this, relate to protecting renters, and wanted to dive in, Nadia, to your expertise on this issue. With the passage of the extension statewide eviction moratorium, what lies ahead for low-income renters?
Yeah, so I mean, I think, so what the moratorium does is that if you pay 25% of your rent by June from August, and if you have sign a declaration that your landlord's supposed to provide you, you can't be evicted. And then there's also a piece that says that allows for rent assistance if you are at a certain level of the area median income. And so, it's pretty amazing, but I've been a tenants rights attorney in this county for 13 years. And when I first started, it was kind of a joke where we're like, if we could just get just cause in San Jose, we can retire, because like we never thought it would happen. Not only do we have just cause in San Jose, we have statewide just cause. And And then the amazing thing about these moratoriums was they're stopping evictions from happening. Like they are actually putting, something like prioritizing the right of people to be housed over a landlord's right to get their rent money, which is, if you think about it, if you think of me as like a young attorney 13 years ago, like my mind would be blown. Like, I can't believe we're doing this. And so, like as community activists and community organizers, we know that they're not enough, but it's amazing what we've done so far. And I think it's really important for us as tenant advocates, as people advocating for people who are unhoused, to really take this energy and to take this moment and be like, this is what we need to do forever. This is like the bottom. Like we should be in a place where no one is being evicted, where we're not putting people back, like we're not making people homeless, that we're paying people's rent. We see what we've done at the federal level in terms of getting rent relief. We've seen the amazing work of Destination Home in our community and the homeless prevention system. I think we need to take this and be like, this is what our reality should be in the post-pandemic world. We shouldn't be in a world, we should be in a world where no one's getting evicted unless like there's some health crisis or some health and safety violation. Like that's what the vision of what we need to be doing as a tenants' rights community. And so I think that like the next step in this movement is to keep pushing a very bold vision that is rooted in housing as a human right, and really about stopping evictions.
Yes, thank you for that explanation. I know that's a lot. So I want to ask all of our panelists to think about this and answer this next question. We can start with Jerome. What is the one thing that cities and electeds can do to make meaningful change to get more people into stable and affordable homes?
Well, one thing I think San Jose can do is change like their zoning laws. Downtown San Jose has no density problem. It's the outlying areas of San Jose that have density problems, and individuals don't want more housing built. Well, permits or the zoning doesn't allow more housing to be built, and individuals don't want housing built anyway. And I think local officials should listen more to the individuals that are impacted by being like the laws that they currently have, and talk to individuals who, like myself, are homeless. Like if I wasn't part of the client's collaborative, I wouldn't have a voice at all when it comes to what I feel should be done about the homeless population. And that's 99.9% of the homeless individuals don't have a voice. And so city officials really need to get out and actually talk to individuals and see what their life is like on the streets and the shelters, and stop depending on a lot of the nonprofits to try to solve the problem when the problem has just grown exponentially over the years, and the problem is just going to continue to grow. Yeah, I think that's it.
Wonderful. Yes, definitely a lot more density opportunities throughout our city. So excited for all that's to come around opportunity housing. And so, Tiffany, what can our elected leaders and cities do to support more affordable housing, and from your take?
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback off Jerome again. So I want to just emphasize that low density is exclusionary, right? It's proven that single family zones, low density zones are more monolithic, less diverse income-wise and racially. And it's not popular to get more density, not right now, but we have to, I think elected officials have the responsibility to educate the community about it, right? It's the lack of affordable housing that's causing people who are from here and people who want to move here unable to afford it, right? We need to build more to accommodate for the jobs, right? The job and housing imbalance. So yeah, I feel like elected officials have so much power to say like, hey, actually having new apartments is not actually gentrifying us. It's when there's more people coming in, but the same housing market is making it so tight. And what else can elected officials do? I think while waiting for affordable housing and getting that built, they also need to support unhoused individuals and get things. Some cities in this area don't even have safe parking and mobile showers for people. And these are so important because it's basic hygiene, but it's also provides a central location for social services to be provided. So like county staff can come out and have a centralized area to contact people who are on the streets and try to get them into more stable housing.
Yeah, wonderful. Great ideas. You must have, did you run for office? Thanks, Tiffany. That was great. Dr. Rudolph, do you want to chime in on this one? What can elected officials in cities do to support the community and your constituents?
Yeah, I agree with Jerome on the zoning, right? So we're building teacher housing, it's teacher and staff housing in our community. And we have to work with a developer to purchase a building because we can't rezone our own property, because to get it rezoned requires the city's approval, even though the state has given school districts the ability to build housing, right? And so like that right there illustrates the problem. We have land, we have the funds to do it, and yet we can't build because of zoning requirements. So that's the first, and I'm gonna cheat because I went last. The second thing I would say is that we have to get into some good trouble. Like we have to say that this is worthwhile. Mountain View thrives, Google thrives, not because of all the engineers. There are people who feed the engineers. There are people who clean. There are people who just keep things going behind, electricians that are just behind the scenes that we often neglect to think about because we're so focused on, what algorithm or what AI was sort of built. And what we have to remember is that our society thrives because of the diversity that exists within it. And so we owe it to ourselves to build as much housing as possible, because this really is a predictable issue. The community, the Bay Area, has never had enough housing to house everybody that's here. So it's a predictable issue. If you don't have enough housing, but you got more people, a surplus of people, somebody's going to end up on the short end of the stick. So let's just start by solving that problem and stop with and not to knock people who have single family homes, but let's stop with the not in my backyard mentality and start saying what is best for our community as a whole. And what's best for our community, what's best for education and kids and everyone else is to have diversity of income, diversity of characters, diversity of faces, religions, all of that. And the only way that exists is if you build more housing that can accommodate a diverse set of individuals who have diverse sets of needs.
Most definitely agree with everything you said. And yes, those NIMBYs, we have to counteract on them and some of their ideologies. But Nadia, what from the Law Foundation or your personal perspective can our local electeds do or cities do to address these challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to center the voice of the people who have been most acutely affected. I mean, and that's like getting to the nitty gritty, getting like when we talk about eviction court, when I talk to electeds about eviction court, show up, come to eviction court, see what it's really like for a tenant to be evicted. Go to the shelters, go to the communities that are most acutely affected by COVID. Go and talk to people who are being affected. And I think it's important not only to center the experience, but really think about burdens in the terms of, from the perspective of those who are most acutely affected. I think a lot of times, we tend to think of a landlord, sometimes landlords win, sometimes tenants win, or what are landlords and tenants facing? like, for example, when we're talking about these moratoriums, but like, let's really talk about the burdens, not only on the people who are most acutely affected, but what's the burden on our community? If we have a bunch of people, if we have an eviction tsunami where people are going to be facing eviction, like, what does that mean for our community? We know that there's public health, negative public health outcomes, negative education outcomes for kids if they're evicted. So I think like we really need to center the voice and center the experience of those who have been most acutely affected, and really hold elected officials to that standard, really bring them in. I'm glad there's a lot of elected officials here. I hope more can come and more actually hear from the people that were here. It's amazing that Jerome's here, someone with lived experience. And I'm glad that we're able to magnify those voices during this panel.
Awesome. And Jerome, I'll hand it off to you on that's a good segue. You know, what are the hardest things about being housing insecure and houseless from your perspective?
The hardest thing is being homeless. Like, I think the hardest thing is not becoming, well, in the shelter environment, not becoming institutionalized and complacent when you're here. You know, when you see individuals who come in a certain way and then kind of deteriorate over time because they're not getting opportunities, or because they, you know, can't keep a job, or they just have other issues going on, they just kind of resign themselves to, you know, their fate of being here. And that's a hard thing to get over. You have to be really strong and motivated not to just stay here and have everything determined by someone else. Another thing for me is, you know, I don't have any privacy, and privacy and mental breaks are so important when it comes to, you know, your health and your well-being. And not having that, it takes a toll on people. There's a lot of, you know, argument because people are angry and being in the same place, you know, for, you know, an indefinite amount of time. You know, having that, you know, that uncertainty about, you know, when you're going to get out of this place, it causes a lot of stress and friction. And so I think, you know, the hardest thing is just being able to overcome those issues. And a lot of people can't do that. And so it just becomes like a circular thing where, you know, you're here and, you know, you kind of get complacent.
Yeah. And Nadia, I think that this is a good segue of how, you know, how do individuals take action and how do they get involved to help get our neighbors housed? What can we all do to make that a reality?
I think the first thing is to get educated and know your rights yourself. We have a lot of information. I know there's a lot of questions here about like what people's rights are. If you go to the Law Foundation's website, we have information there. I think secondarily, get involved with, you know, your neighborhood association, with your tenants organization. There's a Silicon Valley Renters' Rights Coalition, PACT, LUNA, Affordable Housing Network, Livable Sunnyvale. There's so many organizations out there, the Milpitas Tenants Coalition, who are doing the work. And so I think it's really important for people to reach out to those organizations, become a part of them, see if they can get connected to that community. And I think it's also important to reach out to your elected officials, you know, like keep an eye on what's happening at the city council level, at the county level, at the state level, and get involved. There's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of things happening. There's a lot at the state level. And so I think, you know, like getting informed and getting involved. SV at Home has like a great, like, you guys provide amazing information like every week. So I think there's, you know, there's a lot that people can do to get involved.
Yes. Definitely. Okay, so I know that there's been a lot of questions put into the chat, and those have not been lost. They've all been collected nicely for me, and I'm going to sort of ask any of our panelists if they want to answer. Some of them are very technical, but I know one logistical question was about sharing the slides, and I've been told that yes, the slides can be shared. So wanted to just call that out. But let's see here. So we had one of our elected officials from Santa Clara mention, you know, I'm all in for the moratorium, but what do you say to people that tell him or her, what about the small landlords that have to pay their mortgages?
Assuming that's me, since yeah, so I think, you know, I think there is rent relief. You know, I think that we should be supporting efforts to get rent relief to tenants so that those small landlords do get paid. And I think we also should be advocating for mortgage relief, especially during this pandemic. And so I think that those things go hand in hand. You know, like I think, you know, I'm a fiery tenant advocate, and so it seems like I'm, you know, like the stereotype is that I'm, and I'm not, you know, like I think it's important to recognize that landlords have an important role to play in our community. They're housing people. And so I think it's important for us to advocate for policies that are going to lead to stable housing. And if people, you know, if tenants can't pay rent, but if there's federal rent relief, if there's rent assistance program, those landlords also get paid, and it's going to benefit both landlords and tenants and everyone in our community.
Wonderful. Let's see, what else do we have here? So here's another question. This might be again for you, Nadia, but it says, I read that FEMA is guaranteeing repayment to cities that provide motel rooms for unhoused people. How do advocates persuade cities to place unhoused people in motels? Sunnyvale says it's the county's responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, I think so in Milpitas, I think they went through this as well. Like, I mean, I think part of it is that we need to, you know, like there's a lot of people on the ground who are doing the work in terms of countering this, like this NIMBY sentiment, right? If there's a hotel for people who are formerly homeless, they're not homeless anymore, right? It's not like we're bringing homeless people into the community, we're housing people. And so I think that you know, like, I think there has to be like a battle of the minds. I also think there's really specific laws that actually require, you know, require cities to do their part. You know, in Milpitas, like there was, you know, we did do a legal demand letter because I think there are some laws that were violated by, you know, saying that they're going to fight this. But I think part of it is that, you know, we need to be doing a better job of just advocating against this NIMBY sentiment and being like, no, we want to be an inclusive community where everyone can live. You know, we want people from all backgrounds. I mean, look at this panel, like all of us are from very different backgrounds, live in very different communities, and we're all providing really vital services to our community.
Definitely.
I also just point out just real quick. So if cities thrive off of hotel tax. I mean, they make money off of it, right? And if we're thinking about how we employ people, if a hotel is empty, they can't pay their people, nor can they pay their mortgages that they have. And they don't provide a tax to the city that the city then uses to provide other services, right? And so there's this wheel that sort of spins around where everybody is interdependent upon each other. So if FEMA can help pay hotels and cities can say, we know that you have a vacancy issue going on here that's impacting your bottom line. And, you know, we're going to set this service. I've seen it happen in DC, right? We're going to set this service up, and then it starts the wheel spinning again, and it gets people off the streets, it gets them into more stable housing, and it allows for people to get back on their feet and start moving forward. Now, I'm oversimplifying that whole part right there, right? But the point is that the ecosystem thrives off of allowing the hotels to do it. And so it just takes the political will to say, this is it's the right thing to do. And it will benefit us all in the long run, right? And it allows for organizations to provide more resources. We have a food truck that was provided by the county through a grant, so we can drive our food truck over there to provide food for anyone who's under 18. I mean, there's so many things that could be set up if you provide someone with stable housing. And so there's an incentive there, but oftentimes it takes elected officials to think past, that immediate reaction and start saying, like, how does this benefit everyone? And not saying that the goal is to make money or make a profit off of it, but we're all dependent on each other, I guess is what I'm trying to point out.
Yes. Yeah, no, definitely. That's key. And at this point, I mean, it's political courage sometimes, depending on the situation. So I'm going to wrap up and kind of do a quick rapid fire questions for all of our panelists here to kind of sum up in 2 sentences, what do our electeds and community need to know or do to make a meaningful difference in this situation? And I'll start out with Tiffany.
Sure. I want to emphasize that everybody should be connected with those who are struggling right now and to know exactly what they're going through. Because if you don't know, how will you help amplify their voices? How will you be advocating for things that are actually going to be effective? And then I would also like to say, like, everybody can be an organizer, right? We need different skills in organizations. We need people who speak different languages, who have the mindset of wanting to build an intergenerational and multiracial movement where everybody's voice is heard. And, we need people who want to imagine, like, the world we want to live in. And we need people who are good at talking, who are good at having one-on-one conversations, but also presenting arguments. So everybody has a role in social change.
Definitely. I love that. Thank you for sharing that, Tiffany. Jerome, what can people do?
People can hopefully be more empathetic, because it can happen to anyone. Homelessness can happen to anyone. It's not just because, people have, maybe substance abuse issues or things like that. It's just some people are just down on their luck. And, a lot of people have a lot of, I guess, stigma attached to homelessness because of the individuals that they may see, out on the streets or in the parks and things like that. And you have to realize there's almost 10,000 people that are homeless in Santa Clara County. And on a given day, maybe you see 100, if that. So there's a lot of people that you don't see in Santa Clara County. And so you can't really pass judgment on the entire population based on this small segment of individuals that you see maybe on a daily basis.
Yeah, definitely. So Dr. Rudolph?
I think that we're talking about a community that created the cell phone and Facebook, stuff that we have integrated into our daily lives, things that, I'm old enough to remember the typewriter and using it, right? So I'm dating myself just a little bit, but if we can do that, we can solve this problem. And so what I would say is that entrepreneurial spirit needs to exist within city council. It needs to exist within the county commissioners. It needs to exist at the state level with state legislators, because if we can, elected officials are the conduits that make this thing work. They have the ins and outs. They understand how to connect everyone. Things that I work in silos all the time because I'm focused on education, but the pandemic has opened it up to say, it's not just about education, it's about mental health, it's about food insecurity, it's about health just in general. And so if we can do that because of a pandemic, we do that on a day-to-day basis. And so what I would encourage all elected officials who are on here is to take a more entrepreneurial spirit and to say we can solve this problem the same way that we can find a way to charge people $1,000 for a cell phone and make it happen, right? And make it palatable so that people feel good about it. And the other thing I will say, which I hit on earlier, is if you're in a position to give, or if you're not in a position to give, give time, give money, give resources, give advice, do whatever you have to do to give, because that's really what we're supposed to do anyway. So just those two things.
Definitely. Well, it's been my honor to dive into this issue deeper with all of you amazing panelists. I will hand it off to Nadia. We're going to go and do some more Q&A with the audience, and the panelists are going to stick around to ask some other questions. So thank you all for joining us.
Yeah, thanks everyone. So we'll just stick around for maybe till 6:45 to answer questions. I think one of the questions for Dr. Rudolph, trying to find it.
From Lucas Ramirez?
Yes, from Lucas.
Yeah, I think I see it here. It says, what support collaboration from cities would be most valuable to school districts during this pandemic?
Yeah, so Lucas is also a city council member in Mountain View. So first and foremost, I would say, I know they talk about mental health, but we need to prioritize that, right? You can't expect schools to just keep hiring counselors. This is a community issue. So I think that's first and foremost. The second thing I would say is that, we have to find, we have to get better about providing additional resources around the big issues that we already knew existed. Food insecurity, we're running a deficit, I believe, and our child nutrition director believes that it's worthwhile to keep feeding people. And so if that means we're going to lose $1 million, we're going to lose $1 million. But I think it's those types of things that help people with food insecurity. All your basic needs need to be met. And so I think the way that cities can help is that often cities look at, what they're seeing on a larger macro scale. And what we need to do is we need to focus on, schools have access to things that people are unaware of, just a lot of information. And so leverage schools to help the community. Because as a parent, if I have to choose between feeding myself and feeding my kid, I'm always going to choose to feed my kid. But doing that has unintended consequences on my ability to do anything else in life, my ability to get out and go out. And then the last thing I would say is that, and President Obama said this when I saw him at the White House. He said, in a world where we expect free internet with our coffee, we should expect it in our public schools. I believe that we should expect it in every facet of our life. We cannot expect people to apply for jobs. We cannot expect people to go off and expand their horizon if we do not provide free internet to them everywhere they turn. And so we have to get better with devices. We have to get better with providing internet so that people can do the things that they need to do and not place that burden on school systems or just public areas that the city controls or something else. I think those are probably the most important things that would definitely help schools, but it would help the larger community.
Definitely. I think there's a question in here for Nadia, so I'll ask you, Nadia, so you don't have to ask yourself. Are you going to have a virtual presentation about the new AB 3088 extension and SB 91 and the prior law from March 2020?
Yeah, we actually have a lot of information on our website. If you go to lawfoundation.org, we have information in Spanish and Vietnamese. We actually just did videos with SV at Home on the new law, SB 91, both in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. You can go to either SV at Home or the Law Foundation's Facebook page or YouTube pages and see that information there. We are also open to coming and talking to whoever about laws. So reach out to me or reach out to housing@lawfoundation.org to get more. If you want to have someone come to your community, to your church, to your school, we're happy to come and talk to people about what their rights are. And we also have little packets about if you distribute food or you have services in person and you want us to get us those little packets in Spanish and in Vietnamese and English, reach out, we will get them to you.
Okay, and another question about, it's really difficult, someone said, it's really difficult to qualify for the rental housing assistance. Is there any other assistance from the government available?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a great homeless prevention system in our county that, you know, is funded through Destination Home, that Sacred Heart kind of manages. The community service agency in Mountain View is a part of that. So get connected with them if you need any kind, if you're facing homelessness. They provide rent assistance as well as providing help with finding assistance as well. You can go to the Sacred Heart website or other information. Sorry, the Sacred Heart website or Destination Home's website to get that information.
Dr. Rudolph?
Yeah, I would add if you have kids, and I think we need to clarify homelessness real quick, because oftentimes we think of homeless as like I'm living on the street. Homeless is you could be living with your uncle. Homeless is you could be, you know, 8 people in a 1-bedroom apartment, and you have a corner. Like homeless is not just I'm sleeping in a car. There are varying forms of homelessness across the board. With that said, if you have a child, you should register yourself as McKinney-Vento. There are tons of protections that exist there, and it actually allows you to keep your child in their school even if you have to move. So if you are in Mountain View, you register as homeless, and you move to San Jose, then we, by law, are obligated to provide you with all the services to get your kid to and from, under normal circumstances if we were open, to and from to the school, and then provide you with additional services. It also, at least for our district, is the first step that starts the linkage to everything else. It gets you to CSA, it gets you to CHAC, it gets you to Hope's Corner. We start thinking of every single resource that we can. There are companies that are donating books and materials and everything else. So if you have a kid and you are in unstable housing, you should register for McKinney-Vento. It takes a couple minutes, but it provides you with food and everything else across the board. And I know every school system from, you know, that I've ever worked with, and all the superintendents I know, we all will do everything we can to help people. So please make sure that you sign up for that so we can get you connected in those types of ways. And it allows us, like I said, we walk people to CSA. We can't do everything for you, but we can at least get you to the door. And from there, and we will stay there to help you work through that stuff. And that CSA then will help you with renters payments and everything else provided by the city. So please do that if you have kids.
Yeah, that sounds like a great resource. I saw a question in the chat just to clarify the name of it, or it's McKinley-Vento.
Yeah, so the McKinney-Vento Act is a federal act. It's actually by 2 legislators. One was McKinney, the other one Vento. They put them together. So it is just protections for homeless students. And so it's often referred to as McV or McKinney-Vento. And so it is a federal protection. It means we can't suspend kids. It means that we have to provide a whole host of services. So if you have a kid, all you have to do is call the school district and say, I'm homeless or I'm in unstable housing and I need to sign up for McKinney-Vento. They are obligated to get you that information. And it's work. I'm not trying to put labels on anybody or anything. It's stuff that's private, but at the end of the day, it gets you resources that you need, especially right now. So McKinney-Vento Act, if you just say McV or McKinney-Vento, or even get close to that, they will know exactly what you're talking about.
Wonderful. That sounds like a great resource. I didn't know about it till today. Thank you for sharing. So I think we're getting close to the 45.
Yes.
45. So yeah, I guess we can officially close out. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we can officially close out. So thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you to Gabriela for hosting this panel, for Dr. Rudolph, for Jerome, for Tiffany for joining us today. Thank you all of you for coming. Also wanted to acknowledge 2 other elected officials, Vice Mayor Lucas Ramirez of Mountain View, and then Catherine Alexander from Supervisor Samedian's office, who were here earlier. There was a lot of questions, people had specific questions about their legal issues. Feel free to reach out to us at the Law Foundation. You can go to lawfoundation.org. And then I also put in the chat information about our direct services. We hope that this conversation continues, that this momentum continues, that you all, may spread the word out, and having these keep having these type of conversations in your community about the pandemic and the housing crisis, and how those both crises really interact with each other. Thank you all, and I hope you all have a good night. Bye.
Thank you.